This is Phantom Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air on our Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. Janet Elaine Schmidt for time. How are you doing tonight?
I'm fantastic. How are you? I hear it's kind of cold on the East Coast.
Yeah, we're having crazy wind chill, so hopefully it won't knock our power out. Because we get these like bad winds coming through, but we're okay. I use like solar energy to power my house, so I have a little bit off the grid, so I should be okay. So what's cool about this podcast is we have a sponsor, and you can see up on the top, you can listen on Newsly. We are a featured podcast on Newsly. Within an hour, an audio version of this podcast will be on Newsly on iOS and Android. Use coupon code GHOST to get 1 month free premium subscription. Again, you can stop scrolling and start listening to your favorite podcast or news articles on Newsly. So thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm great.
No, I was reading about your background, and just to give people a heads up, kind of like an elevator pitch of a high level. You're creative reprogram for success, and you've been a quantum consciousness accelerator, an integrative holistic healing facilitator, an inspirational speaker, life coach, and light worker. Into all that, because I think not everybody in our audience is familiar with terms like neuro-linguistic and even like the idea of quantum consciousness accelerator. So I think you have some teaching for us to happen here. Some learning.
Well, we can start. I start off by saying that our reality, the realities that we live in, are dictated by two different sciences. One is quantum physics, and the other one is epigenetics. Now, quantum physics says, well, like Einstein said, everything's energy. And so you match the frequency with the energy you put out, and you can't help but bring that reality to you. And he even says it's not philosophy, that's physics. And I'll take it further, that the biochemical effects of your brain shows that your very thoughts affect your cells, which means your thoughts have energy if they're affecting your cells. Now, epigenetics, on the other hand, says that it's the imprinting or coding from our ancestors passed down to our parents, and our parents pass it to us from birth to about 7 years old. And the reason why we absorb everything during that time is because we're in theta state, which means we don't really have an opinion. It just kind of flows in. It's before we create our opinion. And then after that, our reality is dictated by anything catastrophic that happens to us and society in general. This is what makes up your belief system, your traits, your thoughts, your emotions, your behaviors, everything. This is what you are. This is a bundle of it. So if something isn't working for you, if you keep repeating the same scenario over and over again, or the same situation, you date the same person over and over again, the same type, and the same thing ends up, it's usually because there's a behavior or a belief. And so I always tell people, don't look at somebody who did something to you. Look at yourself and say, why was I there? Why did this happen? Because it's going to lead you to the belief or the behavior of what's causing the issue for you. And then there's different techniques that you kind of hit on, neuro-linguistic programming, that can actually change a self-limiting belief into a self-enhancing one.
That's really interesting, because I'm a Buddhist. I'm a Nichiren Daishonin Buddhist, which is a Japanese form of Buddhism that kind of believes in basically the power of it's a yin and yang type of thing, but it's also the fact that like what energy that you put out, negative or positive, can come back to you, and then nothing's ever really destroyed, and your energy's always been here, and it gets transferred, right? And if you have a positive experience, you'll bring positivity. If you bring negativity, you bring on negativity. So we try to center ourselves with meditation and try to, though we're kind of things in the past, the Buddhist believe past lives, but past things that influence you. It's kind of somewhat like what the genetic idea, but in more of a philosophical, spiritual concept. But I think I can relate it to what you're talking about in terms of science, because I think there's kind of merging where the lines kind
Hmm.
of cross between spirituality and science and mysticism. It kind of all is interconnected in a lot. And being a musician, we kind of live in this idea of the muse and the universe. And so I kind of
Yes.
can pick up what you're saying.
Well, and it's true. I mean, quantum physics is the biggest science that actually combines it bridges spirituality with the science. So you're absolutely correct in what you're saying.
That's awesome. Because I think the interesting thing I do just as a musician, it might not seem like it relates, but I'm an electronic musician. I use analog and digital synthesizers that create sounds from waveforms. I'm a sound
Right.
designer. So
Yep.
I take sine waves, triangle waves, square waves, and I take them and turn them into vibrations that make rhythms and music. And what I find over the years that I've been doing it is these different waveforms can trigger behavior in people
Yes.
because the tones that you create from them. And so it seems like it's a little bit of science, a little bit of art and spiritualism all kind of combined.
Well, I talk about when we talk about frequency, or we talk about, the vibration we put out. I like to call it octaves. So it's funny that you say that, because I always tell people, what octave are you in? Because the higher octaves attract
Yeah.
higher energy. The lower octaves, are what they are. And they've proven even that our words that we say, love has a higher vibration or a higher octave than hate does. So even we can even get into numbers. It's been proven that number frequencies also have these different vibrations or octaves to them.
Yeah, it's
So
kind of like when you get into recording engineering, you'll notice that in music, there's a lot of people that use falsetto or
yes,
use like female kind of voices. Or you listen to a band like Led Zeppelin, or you listen to like people who take like Smokey Robinson. It's very common that male singers will try to reach kind of feminine sounds, those
yes,
higher frequencies, because they cut through what we call the headroom. So within our mix of sound waves, the female voice kind of cuts through, and it's higher frequency than the lower baritones. And so we purposely engineer things sometimes to fit those frequencies. And you'll hear a lot of famous, even Axl Rose. Why are they so
right.
pitched up? Rush, why is it pitched up? That's kind of the reason.
Yeah, and the higher up we go in frequency, the higher in consciousness we are. And that's why it's important.
I think that's interesting because it kind of does dive into the consciousness. I mean, music creates sound pictures, or what we
Yeah,
call sound paintings, and people can recall from a song a picture in their mind. So those frequencies are triggering images in your brain, is taking that sound and turning it into a different form, or turning it into an emotion or a feeling, reminiscing or feeling good or feeling angry, or what you can trigger all kinds of things. So I always say people, musicians can be life coaches and influencers because we can trigger different behaviors based on the frequencies we're sending you.
this is correct, because in neuro-linguistic programming, so neuro is the brain, linguistic is the language, correct? Only 7% of what we communicate is our words.
Mm.
93% is through the vibration, is through our motion, our movements, everything else. 93% is nonverbal. So what you're saying makes total sense according to neuro-linguistic programming.
I think that's really interesting because if you get a better handle on what neuro-linguistic programming is, or the type of quantum concepts you're talking about, I think musicians, we accidentally or maybe purposely, we get into these frequencies just because we find out we get reactions. So
Right,
this kind of frequency triggers a hit or it triggers emotion at a concert, and the people all start getting reacting, and then you get good reactions, you get positive reactions, and you kind of, okay, I'm going to go with that. So we kind of
right.
learn what works, and we use that, and it's nonverbal. A lot of it's music, it's notes,
Yeah.
it's
That's what I'm
key.
saying. It's the
Yeah,
octaves you're playing. You've learned what octaves touch on any emotion, and you can play
mm,
those octaves. So it's
yeah.
very fast. to think of it in those terms.
I guess to try to figure out how to verbally communicate, because you got to try to convey what your message is. Because like if you're in this pattern where you keep on repeating the same thing because you keep on finding the same person because you
Right.
didn't change. What I found that
Right.
like with a lot of people, being a musician, we write about like pain and we turn it into art. But you don't want to keep on creating a crucible just because it
Right.
makes you money. You want to be able to be happy. So do you want to go be in a painful life because that generates your income, or because you can turn it into commodity, or do you want to actually live your full life and not repeat the same mistakes?
It's true. It's true. It's an interesting thing that we as humans choose even to listen to the same type of song over and over again. And it's because we're not, we like to stay in a certain, what they call a paradigm, a certain belief system. But
Mm.
it's also interesting that when we decide to leave that belief system or that paradigm, that we start listening to different music.
Mm.
We switch to different octaves that reach us to what we want, what we wish to feel, or what is fulfillment for us.
I kind of feel that that's the kind of idea of like why I decided to call my music expansive, because like a lot of people who are musicians, they'll get stuck like I'm a trance artist, I'm an EDM artist, I'm a rap artist, I'm a rock, I'm a punk, right? And then what I always like to point out is like, well, progressive rock kind of mixes multiple genres. It'll
Right.
be jazz, rock, hip hop, everything. Like progressive rock artists can go everywhere. Like a band like Genesis or Yes, they can go Pink Floyd. They go all different directions, taking classical, jazz, everything. And so if you think about like new wave was really cool because it took everything. A new
Yeah.
wave band like took multiple genres, funk, disco, rock, everything, and then kind of threw it all together with all kinds of imagery that was like mixing genders at the same time. And so then you had this very open-minded type of music that was like hard to pin down where it was coming from. And I've always been, I'm a child of the 70s. I was very much inspired by that kind of 80s, 90 period where I think music kind of opened up where you could come from all directions.
Yeah.
And I got the
I,
idea of expansion. I think that why not be as expansive and not as narrow?
well, life is about being expansive. And I think that we're headed in a time of massive expansionness, if that's a word. I think people are tapping into their consciousness more. They're being more aware. I don't like using the word awaken, but I do believe that people are having a larger awareness of the awareness around them, if that makes
Hmm.
sense. We're aware now of the awareness around us. So now what are you going to do being aware?
Yeah, it's like I guess it gets the difference between that you have behaviors, and sometimes people confuse their behaviors with values, right?
Yeah.
So they might think a family value is being strict with my kids and being very disciplinary to a point you spank them and do all these things, and that's a family value, but it's not. That's a behavior that you're confusing with a value. And
Yes.
the value is you want respect, but is it respectful to hurt another human being? Probably not. So you kind of got things like jumbled up.
Well, this is also why I say that there's been an increase in consciousness, because there was a time that that was okay. And that time is no longer okay. And so when I watch this, you can see the growth in consciousness over decades. So it's kind of refreshing to see and feel.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with my parents. Grew up in the 30s and 40s, and my great grandparents and my grandparents. They all felt like, oh, using a ruler, using the stick, using the belt. That was what they were taught. That was what
Mhm.
they felt was right. And then we all know now today that people, sociologists and psychologists and psychiatrists always say, well, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah.
That was you've been taught wrong. Don't do that. and,
Well,
and
it was, if you look at it, it was programmed. I call it programming. It was programmed in them. It was
mhm,
programmed because their parents did it, their parents did it, their parents did it. And now
yeah.
we're in we slowly started entering different parts of society where we're trying to deprogram that and reprogram another way. You can look at it that
Yeah,
way.
because he had this the old school kind of is like, I'm your father, I'm your elder, listen to me. Even if I get drunk every night, do as I say, not as I do. Right.
Exactly.
So you can't go
Correct.
do that, but I'm telling you, and you should just listen to me because I'm your father, or I'm your grandfather, or I'm an elder, I'm older, I'm the matriarch, whatever. And now people are saying, well, yeah, if it's not right, if what you're saying is morally wrong, even if they're older than me, I don't have to listen to that.
Yeah. 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 It's the changing up of programming and people really looking at everything that's happening. It just opens up a whole new life for everyone. And when you start examining where you came from, and just when you're talking about, your family, I came from the same type of family. My parents grew up about the same time, and they were just raised differently. But when we start to really look at what's not working, because that literally was not working, and instill a new way and see that it does work, we really shift not only our conscious self, but we shift the consciousness of those affected. And
Mhm.
that's sometimes I think that's even the larger goal, or the larger gift. I'll
Yeah,
call it a gift.
yeah.
I think a larger gift that comes out of it.
Because I was a sociology major in college, and so I was into like the microcosm, the macrocosm, the ideas like anomie, and just like looking at like at a microcosm, like the individual. Okay, so the individual is responsible for the behavior to a certain extent, but then if you look at the group, like we studied like group behavior, like what happens if somebody else fire in a crowded room, like what happens in a
Yeah.
riot, like why do you we the sociology is kind of study of, but you look at people in the microcosm, you look at them individually, but you also look at them in the groups and group behavior, and
Yes.
how groups expand to like nations, tribes, big groups, individuals, cults, and you start to look at patterns that are not just based on one person, but how people behave when they get into groups, and how that group behavior is initialized or not, or triggered, or that I've
Right.
always found very interesting, because I think
That
it's
is
yeah,
that
people
is
don't always get into that.
that is interesting, because I as I said, a lot of our behaviors and our traits, I mean, we get a lot of it until we're 7, but after that it's anything catastrophic, and society that's going to condition us. So we also have to look at the society that we live in, the
Hmm.
country we live in, the town we live in, the state we live in, and what are all of their behaviors, their beliefs in general, because that does affect us as well. And
And then
so,
yeah, I think that's a total. Interesting with my education, what I did is I took sociology and then I took political science as a double major. And so what was cool about it, I got to see that micro macro from groups and individuals, and then look at the political systems and how they affect it. Right.
yes,
So we look at multiple political systems, from from being a socialist to a communist to an indigenous tribal system to a capitalist system, and then looking at how all these things interact at the same time, of taking concepts of the Weber and all these like sociologists, and he's like, wow, you like a master, you know, dictators utilized all
yeah,
kinds of concepts that were able to trigger and control people based on like sociological behavior and political behavior and ideology all combined. So if you kind of look the way I was taught, I started to look at all sides of it, no matter what
yeah.
it is, Western or
You know
Eastern
what?
or
You have to look at all sides of it. I don't look at anything as good or bad. I always say I have compassion for everything, but I will say there is only one word for the basis of everything. When you're talking about dictators and just governments and that sort, and it's fear. Fear is the
Mhm.
biggest thing that's pushed out to control. And I wish people would look at that and understand and ask themselves, is this fear-based, or is this, positive? Is this safety, security, and confidence? I mean, is this giving us safety, or is this just putting fear out there? And
Yeah.
I think that's a good question to
You
ask.
look at
Because, pardon?
if you think about the balance of power, how the East and West, or different political system, communism and capitalism, they would use these balance of power concept based on getting the public to fear. Like,
Yes, that's
capitalism
what I'm
gets
saying.
you to fear communism, and communism gets you to fear capitalism, or you're told to fear different groups. You're told to feel
Yes,
different ethnicities in order for certain people to gain power positions through a balance of power, and they're manipulating you like a chessboard. And if you can
correct.
understand how you can be triggered or manipulated, and realize that it's not your idea, that idea has actually been kind of force fed into you, and you're
Yes,
falling for it, and you've got to be
yes.
more holistic or critical thinking, and not just get what you're fed and immediately react to it in the way they want you to.
That's why I ask people. One of the things I ask people, if you have a really, really strong belief, ask yourself, where did you get it? Did you get it from your parents? Did you get it from society? Did you get it from your friends? Or is it really something that you really believe? So these are things that
Mhm.
when somebody's really dissecting to decide to change certain areas of their life for reprogram for the success they desire, these are things that you have to break down and be able to go into and really be honest with yourself. And usually when somebody has really strong beliefs, that's the first thing I ask them is, where'd the belief come from?
Where'd you get it from? Yeah, because a
Yeah.
lot of times people, like, you could break free of your family structure, but then you could be kind of primed to be triggered by a cult movement. And so you could end up
Yeah.
joining a cult because of your family life. And so you thought
Right.
you're breaking free, and then you get into the same structure within a cult. And then you leave that cult and you go into another cult, or you
Yeah.
keep on going from one cult to the next, because you haven't solved the core problem that might have been the inner child that was wounded
Yes.
by some kind of situation, and you don't acknowledge it, and you think these ideas are yours, and they're really not yours. You've kind of absorbed them, like you said.
Correct. Correct. And that's why you just hit on why people repeat over and over and over again, because they never get down to the core of why they have that behavior or why they have that belief, and so they'll just keep repeating it. So that was a great example of how it happens.
I would say in my life, one thing that really changed is that I had a cancer at age 27. I had level 3 sarcoma. And I was, before the cancer, I was painfully shy. I wouldn't do public speaking. I wouldn't even, if I was in a band, I would just be playing keyboards. I'd never sing. I was never up front. I was always in the back. And after the cancer, I just said, why am I putting these walls on myself? Why am I limiting myself? And once I survived it, I changed my life significantly, because I started questioning, why did I have myself in this box? Then
Yes.
I went and I lived in Japan for 2 years. I
Oh,
would have
good for
never done
you.
that. I would have never done that. So I started to do things I would have never done. And I think it's really that you have to get to that point, and you don't have to get cancer for that to happen, but you have to have
No.
something that you start to question, why are that person in the mirror, you're looking back in the looking glass, like, why are you that way?
Yes. Yes. And it helps you. It helps you also to, like, for me, it was the money consciousness that took me down that rabbit hole for me to change up for myself. And I had to figure out, why was it that um, I had a situation where I was given a large sum of money, and I always believed in helping the underserved, both nonprofit and like. I was chairman of the board of a nonprofit that helped homeless women. I grew up on the poverty level, so I now am in a position where I can help a lot of people. And so
Mhm.
I started giving money away to people, helping people. And before long, everybody was attached to me for the money. And I couldn't say no. And before long, I was in arbitration. My financial person, who was with a well-known international firm, had lost almost all my money and in an investment. And during the arbitration, I kept thinking, I'm going to lose all this money. I never once didn't think I wasn't going to win, but the statistics of arbitration are, even when you win, you're lucky if you get 15% back.
Yeah,
So,
we get all their money back.
So sure enough, the guy gets disbarred, his partner fined, the company fined, but I get 10%. So now I'm sitting here going, okay, I can understand the quantum physics, the vibration of it all, right? Here I am, I'm not going to get the money. But what was the epigenetics for me? Like, I had to sit back and say, there's got to be more to this than just energy. There has to be. And I had to go into my belief system. And so I started studying epigenetics and the whole belief system. And it turned out that I came from 8 generations of ministers who signed up to be economically challenged, who signed up to give their last cents to the underserved, and who had no money to manage. And I don't want to take that away from them because it's very honorable. I know what some of them went through to do the work they did. So I don't want to take that away, but that was an imprint in me. I mean, my mother used to say, if my dad had this certain amount of money in his pocket, that my dad thought he was wealthy. She thought that wealthy people were not nice people. And that money was the root of all evil. Now, this was programmed in me from the time I was born. And so
you're going to try to shed it because you think it's evil. That would be kind of like the kind of, you can't have it, because if it makes you evil, then you're going to shed it and give it to other people so you don't hoard it.
Exactly. So this is how I call it inherited money consciousness, that some of us don't even know that we have. And it can really dictate how much money you hang on to. It's just like a lot of times they talk about the lottery winners. They'll get the money, but they'll be broke in no time. It's because they have this
because they can't handle it.
They have this level of money consciousness, and it's inherited. And so once you untangle it and you actually increase the threshold for the level of conscious money that you can hold in your system, in your imprinting, in your programming, then you're able to manage that money and have the money and all of that. But I also had to ask myself, what was it about me that put me in front of this financial person what was the vibration I had that he could be in front of me, rather than it be somebody who would take care of my money. Do you understand what I'm saying? So I had to ask myself, what about me that was attracting him? And so that was another different rabbit hole that I had to take myself down. So it's all about examining what behaviors work for you and what doesn't. And the first place you look is not the person who's doing it to you. What puts you in front of you?
Yeah, I mean, Buddhists believe that, they believe that you actually caused your situation, that your actions, and the actions of even people before you, your predecessors.
Yes,
in the karmic idea of a Buddhist, at least most Buddhism, even Nichiren Daishonin, is like, if I put myself in front of that person, I was kind of on a road that was going that way karmically, because I was doing things that put me in front of that person at the moment that happened, because it's karmically kind of destined to be. Now, it doesn't mean you can't do like some kind of psychic judo and recover from a negative event. But because if you have a negative thing and then you take the positivity out of it, you can kind of, take that bad energy and not get, kind of use a psychic judo and move around, do it so it's not, but because somebody comes at you and you flip it back around and it's not negative, it's not actually like violent, but you're actually defending yourself and then becoming more of you. You actually, you learn from that situation and you grow.
Yes, and I do. I say that I looked at if I wouldn't have had that situation happen to me, well, I probably wouldn't be sitting in front of you today talking about any of this. And and it helped me to uncover it. And not only that, but help a lot of other individuals switch up areas of their life, change a self-limiting belief into a self-enhancing belief. And so I always say I probably wouldn't be talking to the person I am today about it if I hadn't have gone through it.
So I guess one thing we've been kind of getting toward it, but like what is the whole brain state? What does that mean?
A whole brain state is when you can get your, I call it the left cortex and your right cortex into a whole brain state. Because your left cortex is your logical side, right? And your right cortex is your creative side. And so a lot of times, like for instance, even in trauma, the reason why you don't heal is because they're arguing on how to heal you, because we hold trauma fragmented in our minds. And so they're arguing how to heal. And so if you can bring them into whole brain state, which EMDR or even eye movement integration does, that treatment crosses your left cortex with your right cortex, brings you into whole brain state. And so now they can heal. They call it the inner healer because now they're in agreement on it. And the healing can begin. So you'll remember the event, but you won't have that intense feeling or anything like that. But the whole brain state also is done through PSYCH-K. And PSYCH-K is a technique that I use. It was created 30 years ago by Rob Williams. And what it does is it's a way that you can test someone's subconscious mind. So I could, if you told me I have an abundant mindset, I could test your subconscious and it will never lie, because your subconscious mind runs 95% of your body. So if I test your body, it's not going to lie about whether you believe it or you're not. Even if you say you believe it and you can really think you believe it, but do you believe it? And so you can test that. And through that process, they have a process then where you can literally bring your conscious mind and your subconscious mind into a whole brain state on the new belief that you wish to put in. So we could put in, I have an abundant mindset.
And that's like a reprogramming. So that's the reprogramming.
Yeah, and it will take hold. And for those, I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Bruce Lipton. 20 years ago, he wrote the bestseller Biology of Belief. And it's all about the subconscious mind. And in the back of that book, he writes that PSYCH-K is the fastest, most efficient way to change a self-limiting belief into a self-enhancing one. And that he used it to finish the book, and he attributes to why he has great relationships today. So I do use that after I move out the old belief and instill the new belief. I go through a process of double locking down the new belief. So with Neuro-Linguistic programming and and ThetaHealing and EMDR, I move out the old belief and bring in the new belief. So if it's fear, I move out fear, and then I bring in safety, security, and confidence. And then in the end, I'll go and do PSYCH-K, where you will lock into a whole brain state on I am safety, secure, and confident in every situation.
So this will stop people who are kind of fearful of making that next move. Because you get some people like, I had a guest on yesterday and they were talking about how somebody had a fear of flying. Yeah. And they kept on over planning everything to justify why they can't fly. Because they got to have 2 weeks worth of weather reports. They gotta have like all this information, like, well, where am I? Is the city safe that I'm going to? Or they gotta have all these. So they keep on giving themselves reasons why they couldn't go.
Why they can't go, yeah.
Yeah, they keep on trying to over plan it to like, well, I don't know if I don't have a good plan, I can't go. If I don't know how I'm going to handle the airport, I'm going to handle the taxi, I'm going to handle it. So everything's got to be they can't just live the moment. They've got to try to plan. You
They
can't.
can't go with the flow. They
Yeah.
can't go with the flow. Yeah, fear is one of the biggest things, and it's probably the first thing that I literally reprogram in almost everyone that comes to me and every group.
Mhm.
Because in some way, shape, or form, even when we have lack, we have fear. It doesn't matter
Yeah.
what it is, we have fear. So that's one of the first things I move out. But I had tremendous fear. That was one of the things I moved out right away for myself, because my mom was always fear-based, and she worried about 99.9% of everything that was never going to happen. I was the same exact way. I ended up being a single mom when my son was only 8. He's 29 today. And I used to worry about everything. Everything. I have
Mhm.
I have 2 daughters too, and everything. And one day I decided I didn't want that life anymore. And so I did something else. And this was before I even
Mhm.
had gone through the money thing. Took I acted like I had an invisible bubble attached to me, and I put fear in it. And every time I felt fear, I'd cut it away and put safety, security, and confidence in its place. And I just did this vigilantly for 1 week. After 1 week, I had a situation where I would have in the past made a choice that would not have been good for myself or for anyone else. And it was fear based. I had no fear at that moment. And I just kind of watched. It was almost like watching a slow moving motion picture.
Mhm.
I saw that I would have done this, but no, I'm going here, because I had changed the trajectory by moving the fear out and having safety, security, and confidence. And this is when we talk about paradigm shifting. We're literally talking about, like, when you take fear out, you're changing your life both personally and professionally. You just cannot help but do that.
Yeah, it's always been. It was like when I made the move to go to Japan, and people were telling me it's like, post 9/11, and people was, oh, well, my family's like, it's dangerous to travel. Look what happened in 9/11. So my mom is kind of like you. She just used like 9/11 as a reason not to go on a plane. So you should never go on a plane ever. And I said, well, if I got to go to Japan, I got to go on a plane. So it was like it's like I have, and I couldn't let her. And it's like, well, you don't know how they're going to treat you there. You don't know if they're going to like you. You don't know if how they're going to deal with you, African American. She kept on came out. She came out with like 100 different things
Yeah.
why you shouldn't go there. And I said, well, I really can't listen to what you're saying, because I'm bringing my young daughter. She went to a Japanese preschool and kindergarten, and I couldn't just get caught up in her fear. Which one of the big things I moved away from was the fact that my mom was so fearful of a lot of things, and she was trying to protect her 3 boys. I understand she was trying to protect us, but instead, what happened is we became like, we had all this weight of all
Yeah.
these things that she told us to be, scared of,
Scared
and,
up.
and
Yes.
I'm like, you got to get beyond it, and in the fear of travel, I just had to let it go. And
Yeah.
I went, my big travel was like I went international to a totally different society, had to learn totally different language and culture, but I felt that that really freed me
Yes.
from where I had the paradigm I had been in,
Mhm.
that it just forced me. I had to learn a language or get food. Right? I couldn't figure out how to get in a taxi. I had to do it. I had to get beyond my shyness and actually be able to speak some Japanese to be able to get around, to be able to,
Right.
just live. So I think it kind of putting yourself in a society where you don't know anything about it, don't know the language, it kind of gets rid of a lot of things. Well, it forces you. It puts you right in the middle of the fire.
Well, you make the choice at that point, when you even recognize it, which you did. The first thing and the biggest battle is actually recognizing it. Once you recognize it, it's going to go away. You're
Yeah.
going to find a way to move it on out. No
Yeah,
doubt
human
about
beings, that your brain or you don't think you can learn language, and then you learn it, right? Because
it.
if
Right.
you're put into a society where you have to speak Spanish or Japanese or Chinese, you'll learn it because you have to. Like, it's
It's
not because
true.
the teacher told you to do it, it's because you have to do it.
Yeah.
To just do it, that you have to know where the bathroom is, you have to know where this is, you have to figure it out, and so you're forced to do the everyday things that human beings need to do, you will learn it.
Yes. 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 Although reprogramming, if you choose to reprogram, that's a little bit easier. but
Yeah,
but yeah.
but I think it's yeah, I totally I love the idea of that because I think there's a lot of people who have been kind of stuck in a glass ceiling, or they're in a box, or they're in the inner child and they can't get out of it, and they're still doing stuff that they did when they're 10 years old, 9 years old, or 7
Yes.
years old, and you're 50 years old, or you're 70, or you're 80, and you're still doing it. It's like, and people would be surprised, well, how could you be doing that with it? It's not that hard. Yeah, you actually can be stuck in that.
You can. It's a cycle. It's like being on a hamster wheel. It's hard to get off. And also, I think people get really comfortable with um the same thing. It's
Mhm.
kind of like when people ask, why does an abused person keep going back to an abuser? And
Mhm.
it's because it's what they know. They're
It's
afraid
the
of the
codependency. Yeah,
they're
the
yeah,
codependency, right?
and they're also afraid of the unknown. I
Mhm.
That's why I always say to people, I understand why people stay, I understand why people go. um, and it's and that we can find examples in every area of our lives like that, where people repeat the same thing, and it's because even if they kind of know it's not working, the unknown of going out of that, well, how's it going to work out of that? And what they don't know is by taking a step out of it is how you fix it, how you
Well, how do
actually
you get free? You free yourself
free
from your
yourself.
from your own, like, mind bondage. I came up with
Yeah.
this idea, like, in some of my music, like, the mind bondage. Like, what do you mean? It's like, well, you are self-limiting, right?
Yeah.
You're creating your own ceiling. You're in the box. You're putting yourself in the cage. And a lot of musicians have used the idea of cages, but it's just like in masks. People wear a mask. They have a cage. You have a ceiling limitations. Like, and you try to free yourself by exploring that other side of that. How do you get to the other side? You know anything about Jim Morrison? Like, he break onto the other side. Like, what is he talking
Right.
about? He was a poet. He was talking about kind of breaking through boundaries, and whether or not it was the most the behavior he was doing was the right way to go to that. It's a judgment. But he was a poet and he was trying to
Right.
put it into words. He did it very poetically at
You
genius
did.
level. But a bad outcome because he couldn't get beyond his own demons. But that, yeah, I think the idea of it is like any great poet going even to science, like the idea of being able to think that through and actually find a way to make it happen. Self actualize the words into something, and he kind of did that.
Yeah.
And some people can actually self actualize and do what they're writing about.
This is true. This is true. So how would you say that, aside from going to Japan, how else do you think musicians and even other areas can express themselves to assist other, um, society? I'll just say society out there to elevate and break out.
Well, as a musician, I like to elevate by trying not to have boundaries, right? So when you're a musician, you're taught scales, you're taught structure, you're taught theory, and then what you do as a musician is you break the rules. Like, the first thing you do if you get out of a school like Berkeley, your professor will tell you, you learned everything. I'm like, break the rules. So the whole point is to kind of not get stuck in patterns and to actually figure out how to find an authentic voice by not trying to be somebody else, but taking all your influences and then taking your true inner core and finding a way to create your own sound that is uniquely you, and being not being scared to do that, not going and thinking that I gotta be Taylor Swift, I gotta be Beyonce, I gotta be Led
Right.
Zeppelin, I gotta be Hendrix. You take who you love and you become that version of yourself. Kind of like the way Bowie self-actualized and became Ziggy.
Right.
Before he did that, he was channeling stuff like the Beatles. He was out there sounding like he was David Jones, dressing up like a Beatle, looked like a mop top. Didn't work. When he went and said, "Well, I'm going to take theater and I'm going to create characters and I'm going to go into characters like the Thin
Right.
White Duke and Aladdin Sane and Ziggy," then that worked, and that was uniquely his approach. To say, "I'm going to be a theatrical musician and make it a whole show."
Oh, show. Yes.
And
Yes.
and it, yeah, that
And it
was his
worked.
concept, and he made it happen, and it was uniquely his vision. And so I think that's where I think I always tell musicians, like, you see, Lady Gaga did that. She had the
Yeah.
same kind of issue. She had tried to go out as just a straight musician, no fluff, no character, and it didn't work. And then she created the idea, Lady Gaga, and it's very Bowie like.
Yeah.
She went and created this character version of herself, this other version, and then that broke through. And it's
Yeah.
not exactly her, but it is her, but it's another her. It's
It's
other.
another her. It's an alter ego her.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Beautiful. Well said. Well said. I like that.
That's always been my challenge is, and as a producer, I don't like to make somebody sound like me. I want to make them sound like the best version of themselves. So if I take their
Well,
demo, I'll just make it sound better.
well, that's my job too. My job is to assist people to become the best version of themselves. And so when they come to me, I do the same thing. I find out what octave they're at, and we change that to the octave that they want to achieve.
Because I
Whatever
think
they
sometimes people will do the opposite. They'll actually try to rework somebody and put them into a pattern and say, this is the only pattern you can be in, and and it's not really them. It may be a version of the person creating a pattern is just a clone to their pattern, and then
Oh,
you're just and that's kind of I've always been very against that because like it's like then you just keep on getting clones of like a producer will have a style and they'll just clone it
yeah,
everywhere and it's
yeah,
basically them and
yeah,
they insert it on the artist and that artist is that it really isn't them. But I hit the top 10, so you should go with me. And then that person kind of loses their authentic self and they become something that it's not even what they really wanted.
yeah,
And so I've always been like, why don't you take the best aspects of who they are and actually accentuate them and make them hit better to do, and so that they
yeah.
become a unique version of themselves instead of clone of you.
I agree with that. I actually, it's not me. I work with my clients. It's all about what they want to achieve. It's about them and their person. And so whatever they come to me about, we try to hit it the way they want to hit it. And in PSYCH-K, they have what they call goal balances. So it's basically your new belief. And I actually work with them to write the new belief that's going to be
Mhm.
put in, so that,
Custom.
because if it's my words, it resonates with me. But if it's
Mhm.
their words, it resonates with them. And it's all about, I'm touching their soul. So the way I feel about it is that even when we do affirmations or anything like that, I always tell people, record it in your own voice, even if it's in somebody else's, record it in your own, because
Mhm.
it's kind of like being in your mother's womb. You heard your mom's voice. So when you were birthed, you recognized your mom's voice. It's the same way with our soul. And so when I put in a balance, it
Mhm.
has to be in the person's vibration, because the soul has to vibrate to it. Your subconscious and
You have
conscious
to hear.
mind. Yeah.
Yeah, you
It
need
has
to hear your
to,
own voice. Yeah.
yeah, it has to attune to your words, the words that you would use, not the words I would use.
Yeah, I think that's the problem. I think in some people, they're looking when you're looking for something outside of yourself. And then, like, even like I get in my Buddhist practice, there are people who will just take Nichiren Daishonin's words and just repeat them, kind of like the Bible, right? And this is the problem in any kind of religion. If all you do is just repeat these lines, and that's
Yeah.
fine. There's knowledge and there's history in these texts. But what I always like is like, why don't you give me your own interpretation of those texts and not do a line for line memorization versus interpretation, right? Like if I read it and then I go back and I put it in my own words, well, how I felt it meant what it
Right.
meant. I think that's more significant for your own development than just being able to memorize 30 pages and be able to say it verbatim exactly the way it was already written.
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. That's why I work the way I do, is that it's all about the client who's in front of me. It's not about me. I'm
Yeah.
only here as the assistant.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's the, people can say, well, there's nothing wrong with learning lines in the Quran or the Bible or any of the great texts. But I think people make the mistake if all they do is memorize without processing and having some kind of thinking behind it where they can have their own vision of what they think those words mean. And it's nothing wrong about you having your own vision. It's not sacrilegious to me for you to read it and then get your own interpretation.
Oh no, I think that's freeing. And I think then you are your authentic self. And I think that's what we're all trying to achieve for, because that is the success. That is when you're striving for success, and striving for success is to be 100% authentically you in your beliefs, your behaviors, your thoughts. What is you?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I think I don't know. Today, sometimes you can go down the wrong road because I think again when I get to the point of like you have beliefs and then you have values, and I think a lot of people confuse the two. They think that beliefs are not necessarily true.
You know what? I agree with you, because somebody was recently, I was listening to someone and they were right on what you're talking about. And they had said, we can have the belief of a loving God, but if you're spanking your child or you're doing something that's unethical, are you reflecting that? And then there's some people who can be loving all the time, and then there's some people who think God is a hateful God or whatever, and so then they're angry all the time. And so it's kind of an interesting pattern that people pick up. So it if God's a loving God, but you're not conducting yourself in such a way, then you have to ask, your beliefs don't match your
The
actions.
values.
And so,
Yeah, because
yeah,
you're
yeah,
supposed to,
yeah,
if Jesus is love, then why do you hate?
yeah. Well, I
Hey,
see
keep
that
it
with,
real simple. Keep it simple.
yeah,
Like
no,
the very
I think
simple idea.
that's very, I agree wholehearted with you on that. And I just was listening to, somebody was on a podcast today that I was listening to. I think his last name is Walsh. He had written many books. I think he's sold like 23 million books. And I was listening to him interviewed, and he was just saying that it's interesting how people view even God, that are their values matching? Like if God's angry, then they're angry. And then
Mhm.
and he went down this road, and I was thinking, wow. And he goes, and then there's the people that their actions don't match their beliefs. And he
Yeah.
dissected it just like you were saying, and it was very interesting conversation. But
Yeah, it's hard to like look in the mirror, go look at the tape, and that's you, right? And you're
yeah,
one minute you're saying Jesus is love, and the next minute you're hating your brother, hating your sister. Is that really what they taught? And so,
yeah,
like, who, like you said, like you have this belief, like where did you get it from? And somebody
it,
will say, well,
yeah,
they'll say, oh, I got it from God. It's like, well, did you get it from God, or did you get it from this person
yes,
who said it was from God? And then this person really didn't have the right value. They had a belief that you confused with a value, and
right,
now you're doing a bad behavior because you think it's equal that to God. And so if it's God, even if it's hate, it's love. And then you get confused because you're in this kind of dichotomy that you're getting mixed up. But yeah, you're thinking hate is love. When
yeah,
well, how can hate be
right.
love?
Well, that's why I tell people, keep a chart, and on one side have your belief system, and on the other side have your actions and your emotions, because then you can see if you line up, and then you can see what you want to shift into a new belief system, a new way, a new behavior.
Yeah, it's just, it's like going back to my Buddhist concept. There's like negativity and positivity. If you do negative actions, you could be writing down in words that you think it's positive, but the actions in themselves betray that they're negative. right?
It's
So you could write it down for pages and pages that that's a positive thing, but in actuality, it's a negative thing because the action actually causes negative consequences.
yes, it's true. And the hardest thing I find for humans, for us, is to actually examine ourselves in depth and actually, write down what's really helping us and what's really not. It's really painful to watch some people have a very hard time being very honest about like what's working, what's not, what traits are great, what's not, and to step into actually changing them.
Well, I think it's also because people have fear and then they have guilt. And fear
Yes,
and guilt combined can make you do very bad things.
I
And
agree with
and
that. Can also
so
make
it's like,
it also can make you very physically sick.
yeah, and it ends up becoming negative energy from a Buddhist concept. Like you're just in a negative zone and you're not getting out of this negative behavior because everything you're doing is spiritually draining. It's not ascendant, right? So if you
Right.
want to get on the
Exactly.
positive side, you have to go toward things where you're actually less selfish, more more empathy, more
I
understanding,
agree with that.
less narrowness, more
More
openness.
compassion and come from a place of non-judgment. If everybody could understand that we're all programmed, every single one of us is programmed. You and I are programmed, every single one of
Mhm.
us. If we can start having the compassion to understand where everybody's coming from their programming, uh, then we're starting to create a big bunch of emotional intelligence that will lead us to a strategy of actually living in harmony.
Yeah, and you got to forgive yourself for what you did, but don't keep on doing it.
Yeah,
Right, like, so if you could get
yeah,
to the point where you understand what you did and you understand it was negative and you can break out of the pattern because you can reprogram yourself to go
yes,
toward the light, go toward the positivity, then you can acknowledge that yeah, up to this point I was doing these things and it wasn't healthy, it wasn't right. But if you can get out of that codependency to that negativity, then
yes.
I think you can broaden your life and live the full, example of who you could be.
Exactly. Exactly. The successful example that you have in your mind that you want to be. Yes.
I don't think anybody's ever done. I try to tell people like when I was 17, I had a dream of being a musician. And a lot of my friends stopped because they said, well, I'm not going to make it. I kept on going and I'm still here doing what I love to do. I do other things, but I didn't give up on it. And so as if
Right.
you don't give up on yourself, you don't give up on your dream, you don't think of that's childish, that you keep on doing it, you can actually get to a place where suddenly, you're working with other people and people actually are coming to you because you believe it. If you believe in yourself, people will believe in you.
I
So
agree
I
with
think,
that too. And I'm going to say this, in the quantum field, in the quantum work I do, that means you're putting the energy out there in that field, and you can't help but draw people to you for that. And I would say that to everybody. Start checking the frequency, the thoughts, everything that you're putting out there, because positive thoughts create positive vibrations, positive octaves, and you can't help but bring people to you. It's almost like if you walk into a room with a smile on your face, see how many people come up to you. You walk into a room with a frown on your face, see how many people do not walk up to you. And so if we go through life starting examining, and even if you got up every day and say, this is a joy-filled day, I feel joy. Even if you don't feel joy, but you say, I feel joy, you're going to have a smile on your face. Or if you just put a smile on your face, you're going to start pulling yourself out of that feeling that you had. And these are like very tiny, simple things, but just on a post-it say, isn't it wonderful? Something marvelous is happening to me right now. Every time you had a negative thought, if you said just that line, you'd be pulling yourself out in a couple days. You'd be zooming along on a much higher frequency.
yeah, well, I mean, one of the things I love about this social media with the podcasting is, I've been doing it for a long time and people told me like, oh, that won't go anywhere. I've been doing it since 2016. And it just keeps on expanding because I stopped putting limits. Like I started in a narrow focus and then I expanded the focus. And then I said, well, I don't know how to talk to a psychologist. I don't know how to talk to a mentor. I haven't done that, but that didn't stop me from trying it. And now I'm actually to a place where I was a very painfully shy person. I could not talk to anybody when I was 17, 22, 24. At age 55, I'm not anywhere near where I was. And it's because I faced what my demon was about that communication problem. I was just so fearful. I mean,
Yeah.
sweating and shaking. I couldn't even get out of it. And I just the cancer kind of forced me to say, why am I scared of that? And really after beating cancer, then I was like, well, I'm not scared of anything. So that kind of it kind of made that version of myself go away
Go
because I went and said, well, I'm not scared anymore.
So you left that paradigm behind.
Yeah, I mean, and like I said, I don't think cancer has to be the thing that does it. I think like what you're saying with the reprogramming, and people could go to your website and find out how to get into that. But that was my journey. I didn't understand. I didn't know anything about reprogramming or the kind of concepts you have. I just found my own way. But I think it's cool to talk to people like yourself. And we are at the end of our time, but I do encourage people to go to janetelaneschmidt.com. That will be clickable when this is fully published, and make sure you check out all that you have to offer there. And maybe you can tell people exactly what's on the website.
I have my reprogram sessions. I also offer a reprogram workshop. If people want to get like 10 people together, I'll do a workshop for them. But I have individual sessions, I have package sessions, and they all include reprogramming, whatever behavior, whatever belief system, whatever you want to examine. We can go through whatever you want and get you into the whole brain state.
That's great. I love being able to offer, new points of view and mindsets to people. That's why I do the podcast. I get to meet very interesting people all over the world all the time. Thank you for being on the program. Again, check out janetelaneschmidt.com. Please support the people we talk to by clicking on the URLs and following up. If you get interested, and tell your friends, show your friends, share the podcast. That's how people find out about new, interesting things, by sharing things. So thank you again for being on the program.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Good night.
Good night.